Ladies and gentlemen, a very sunny welcome from Berlin, Germany. Springtime here up in the air. My name is Daniel Stecher, and I'm very much delighted for another Airline Crewing and Operations Enigma guest speaker presentation, turning market disruption into competitive advantage with Kim Breiland. And I'm very happy because I could win her for this session. We got to know via LinkedIn. We had already a podcast together about neuroscience and also cognitive load in the OCC. And I thought it's very insightful information for everybody working in an airline OCC, being affected from a legacy IT and exposed to a very high cognitive load, which has an impact not only on the personal health, but also on the business itself. And that's somehow what is now her talk. And it's around about 45 minutes. What have you in mind?
Yeah,
45 minutes?
I mean, it might be a little bit under that because I left time for Q&A because I didn't know what to expect. I know it's both, live attendees. Thank you if you're joining live. I know it could be replays and you'll see when I get into my talk, like it's meant to have people thinking in real time. I'm not here to just lecture at people. I know you guys had enough of that at the conference. You had a lot to process and think through. And in my experience, in my professional experience, it's really best if we're looking to solve problems and solve them quickly and efficiently and safely. It's important to actually simplify the complexity of any given situation. So the situation can be complex, but how we meet it as humans needs to be simplified. And so what I'm going to walk through today, and again, you will, whether you're joining live or you're watching this as a replay, I would really encourage you to participate in what we're doing to ensure that you get the most from the things that I go through. Okay.
And we can ask questions anytime, or you want to save this?
Please.
Okay, sometimes there are speakers who want it at the end of the session, but okay.
No, and you'll see. So, and I'll go over this in just a minute when I go through the beginning slide. But what's really important for any time that I speak with people in any capacity, virtual, in person, is that I'm not just here to throw out information that you try to assimilate yourself. I want to help you assimilate the information in real time and apply it to your everyday either efficiencies or struggles that you want to solve. So I think that is critical, especially when we're talking about things that are highly regulated and with safety being paramount. Absolutely. Cool. Yes. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, which I think, let me see. Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button. Unfortunately, I think once I hit share, like I don't think Teams allows me to see you. Can you see my screen, Daniel?
Not yet, but I will help you. If people raise their hand, I will call them in and I give you a nudge if there's a question.
Okay, but you couldn't, because I had hit share, but it's you're not seeing it on your end?
No. Maybe you're sharing it with a different device, but we cannot see it yet. At least here, not in Berlin. How is it, Yuri and Martin, you can see something? Now something is coming. Now we see turning market.
Yes,
now we see it. Yeah.
Okay,
now we see it.
So now we're okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna just bear with me, everybody, while I quickly have the screen open, and then also that way if there's like chat, I might look away from the camera. I'm looking directly into the camera now, but if I look away, please excuse me. I'm just trying to look at who's in the group or the chat if need be. Okay, so we're ready to jump right in. Thank you to those who are here live. Thank you to Daniel especially for having me. This is a topic that I am not only passionate about, but I think it's something that leadership or organizations are missing a very simple solution, or at least the path to a solution that can have widespread effects on execution, safety, and employee experience. And so I'm excited to dive in today and to go through everything. the title for today's talk, in case anybody missed it, is Turning Market Disruption into a Competitive Advantage. And what we're looking at is the human layer of your operation, and what that reveals about your competitive advantage. Oftentimes we think of the strategy and the technology, and then we forget the business reality. And so I hope today I can help merge those things together for you in a way that you can apply right now and today. So let me, hang on one second. I'm getting a pop-up on this side. Okay. Can you just give me a thumbs up? Do you see the screen transitioned on your side?
No, you stopped the
It
stopped the
stopped
screen
sharing. Okay, let me try again. I'm sorry. When I hit the advanced button, okay, that should be good again.
Yeah, now we see it. Yeah, I have no aviation background.
Okay, and so I hope I got your attention, everybody who's here, and anybody watching the replay. I think it's very, very important that I drive home the point that Daniel has me here today, not because I'm an aviation expert. And I think that the reason that this is so important, and I mean no disrespect in any way to the extensive experience, intelligence, and ability of this collective group. It's just in my many years of service, I've noticed that oftentimes a solution is right in front of us, but we are so close to the solution that we might have blind spots or biases that are getting in our way of seeing things differently, of being able to innovate and adapt and just use maybe discernment more appropriately. So Daniel has spent 30 years measuring what fragmented systems cost this industry. I focus on how the broken systems affect people and what that costs business. And so my background, I've been full-time in my business for 5 years. I was 5 years before that. I've worked in many different industries, but always in the capacity of execution alignment, organizational efficiency, operational design. And I believe that when you give humans the conditions for success, they want to rise to that occasion, and they do. I also hold a certificate. I'm an associate. I'm a founding fellow, an associate neuroplastician. That's granted by the Institute of Organizational Neuroscience. I am a small group of practitioners who bring a neuroscience-backed lens to operational design. We're finding this more and more critical because of how technology has impacted the human brain and the way that it's literally changing the brain chemistry. And we're seeing this show up as executional friction across all industries. And so we're now looking at how does work need to evolve, especially in the age of AI, in a way that keeps humans in the loop, but improves overall business performance. And so that is what I'm here today to do. So before we go actually, let me go back so you can't see the question. I have an unusual request. I'm not going to share why at the moment, but if you're live with me right now, if you are wearing a watch, I would like you to switch your watch to the other wrist. If you're not wearing a watch, but you have a phone, if you could move the phone to a different place, to a different spot. And we'll circle back at the end of this. And if you're watching the replay, please do take a moment to do this. Put the watch on the opposite wrist, or take your phone and put it away from you. And we'll talk about why this is in just a little bit. Okay, so the first question that I have for all of you, and this is a safe space. This is not a space to criticize or to point fingers or place blame. This is bringing your subconscious up to the conscious and helping you understand a complex situation more simply. So if you could finish this sentence, the hardest part of managing disruption isn't the disruption itself, it's this. So if you're joining live and you feel comfortable, please put that in the chat, and I will be happy to read it if you're okay with that. If you are doing the replay, please take a moment and just write this down. Specifically, it's really great if you have paper and pencil and can write this down. It activates a different part of your brain, and it allows you to think more critically about a given situation. Okay, great. So Martin, thank you for sharing. Martin said culture, and it's so interesting. I was on a call just last week, Martin, with a leader, an executive leader from Walmart. And I know that's a completely different industry, but he shared that culture is a huge problem right now in business efficiency and effectiveness. So thank you for sharing that. And if you want to elaborate, Yuri, it says coordinating everything, because they're, especially in this industry, you're coordinating vast amounts, which Daniel has educated me on over the past few months that we have been collaborating and discussing. And so really what that is, it's interesting how the information in the chat, you may not initially think it goes together, but it does. And culture is what creates the foundation, and the culture is how the organization moves together. Oftentimes people think of culture in more of a soft skills, thinking emotionally, but really culture is structural. When considered correctly, culture is structural. And if your culture has cracks in the foundation, it is going to be much harder to coordinate. And if the daily basis is difficulty in coordination, how does your organization perform during a disruption? Right? So these are things that we often think of, or in meetings get pointed as a strategy problem, a technology problem, or a human error issue. And the leaders who are leveraging disruption in their favor, or leveraging the unexpected, because we cannot predict anything in life, those that think through the lens of how does strategy, technology, and the human condition that's being expected to execute, how are they coming together? What state are they in? And how are we ensuring that it's the correct state in order to not only deal with the day-to-day, but to deal with disruption? Okay, so thank you to those who have shared. If you are, like I said, on the replay, do make sure that you take a moment to answer the question before you go on to the next, before, press pause and do this activity before you continue watching the presentation. So what all of you just were so nice to describe, and what we talked through in the last slide, was brain state. Okay, there are 4 brain states that are acknowledged by the Institute for Organizational Neuroscience, and that is every person in your operation, you including throughout your day in your personal and professional life, have various brain states that you come in and out of. And when we are talking about a highly regulated and where safety is paramount, your brain state, the human conditions of your brain state, are critical, because the brain state is what controls judgment, discernment, critical thinking, decision making, and it allows for system navigation, which we know controllers are experiencing on a regular basis. So when we're talking about a senior controller, someone who has been, who's very knowledgeable, highly trained, has had many reps within their field over a length of time, they will often come to work in what's known as an intentional state. They're deliberate, they're adaptive, they're present. Okay, they can think clearly, they're able to see the full picture. This is the state your operation needs during disruption. And we'll come back to that state in just a moment. The second state is automatic. Now, this is called autopilot for a reason. We've all heard that term, right? It's like when you're driving in a car and you get from point A to point B, but you kind of don't remember how you got there. Like, it's like, wait a minute, how am I suddenly here? Or, you're taking a shower and you're like washing your hair, and then did I wash my hair? These are autopilot moments where your brain is subconsciously just going through the motions. It's habitual, it's pattern based. A controller is running on well-worn processes, fast, reliable, until the situational awareness situation changes and the pattern no longer fits. Then it's like a jolt, right? Then you realize that the automatic state you were in could be dangerous. Maybe it's a near miss situation, and that is the automatic state. Then we have the next state, which is called reactive. This is a period of stress, okay? The brain is in survival mode. The controller is managing threat, not managing the operation. Now, what happens is when you are in a reactive state, your brain stops using the prefrontal cortex and it's now operating from the amygdala. That's the emotional control center. Makes it harder to think, harder to judge, harder to make decisions, harder to think clearly. When you're in a reactive state, it would be very difficult to deal with a safety issue, with disruption, and it makes it entirely impossible all nearly impossible to navigate the given situation that they are presently in. Then finally, we have the depleted state. Okay, this is you're exhausted, you're running on fumes, you're cognitively empty. Humans like to think they can push themselves and push themselves. The brain has not changed very much in 40,000 years. And there comes a point in time where the input absolutely can exceed a human's ability to have output. The tank is empty. Now, what happens if disruption begins? What happens after 8 hours of navigating those 14 fragmented systems, all the workarounds, the cognitive load that they're spending on navigation? Daniel's educated me on this one. This is how we get into this state, right? So you're navigating these conditions and the controller is still at their station, but their decision-making capacity is either gone or massively impacted. Their ability to think critically, think clearly, execute correctly. They are long out of the intentional or even the automatic brain state that would allow them to handle and be adaptive and in the correct brain state for the situation that they are being tasked with doing. Okay. Sadly, due to a number of factors and concerning trends of near misses and safety issues due to post-pandemic surge in air travel, when everybody wants to be out. We have staffing issues. We have technology issues. I think oftentimes as humans, like we want to try to find one thing to point at for the solution. But I think, again, and I'll get into this a little bit more in the next, in a future slide, the operational leaders that think more critically about how culture, what I think it was Yuri said, coordinating everything. And then Martin added on, but every person is in another stage at the same time. That's an excellent point. So Martin, what do you think happens for those watching? What happens when you have an OCC that has all different brain states?
Oh, you have to go slowly, and you have to try that you can take every person with you, but it takes a lot of time. So you can't just push them. After my experience, I need a lot of time to discuss face to face, or I have to oblige persons to follow, to make the choice. You follow or you leave, after a certain time.
Right.
It's very
Right.
difficult.
It is very difficult.
One topic I'm seeing here, first of all, is an excellent slide. One of the key themes in our industry is collaborative decision making, where, of course, you go by the manual, you have to go via the standard process and involve all other stakeholders. And you don't know which of your stakeholders is in which state. So maybe you know already what would be the best decision. You are maybe not requiring really the approval from the other department, but it is the process. And now you wait, and maybe this person is completely depleted. And that's then somehow the, let's say, the weakest of the four states is somehow the dominator of this entire system. And I think nobody is aware that collaborative decision-making is a nice concept, but if you don't know who is the weakest in your team, you are not knowing that maybe this entire system is suddenly becoming weak.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's also having these execution standards and practices and simulations and conversations. And it's simplifying a very complex topic. But by doing so, it allows us to think, I say this again and again, there is abundance of research to support the fact that complex problems do not require complex solutions. And I think that we have come so far away from understanding how technology can alleviate the cognitive load in a way that puts humans into the proper brain state to ensure proper decision-making, collaboration, judgment, discernment, and overall the critical things that make us irreplaceable, in my opinion, is the ability to do that. And so keeping humans in the correct brain state is of critical importance, especially in aviation. And so these problems, these situations are very real, but it's understanding, again, bringing the correct people together to discuss standardization for not only the execution, but for the technological advances that support the execution, and then the human in the loop aspect of what are our human execution standards. How does brain state work into developing and assessing quickly the now, I mean, we could hook you up to brain, technology, and certainly, but that's not realistic in most industries, and on an everyday basis. You're not going to go around hooking people up to see what brain state they're in. So there needs to be standards, and there needs to be a culture, going back to Martin's important point that he made earlier. There needs to be a culture of trust established so that people feel safe and confident to assert their brain state, assert what they need, what they're able to control or handle. I think that, again, there's a lot of fear around AI technology right now. Rightfully so, because some people are really just unethically discussing that topic. But I really do believe, and Daniel and I have spoken at length about this, that as the industry evolves, the technology is going to enable us to be the best at what we can do to ensure the safety of other people, and to ensure that we are strengthening our judgment, strengthening our critical thinking skills, strengthening our discernment, and ensuring that this collaborative discussion that Martin, touched on, makes it easier to coordinate, makes it easier to ensure what everybody knows, especially in aviation, is passenger safety, pilot safety, crew safety. And so we have the tools, we have the answers now, but now as humans, we have to come together and figure out those foundational layers that makes culture about execution and standards for business development. And I think that's the thing that a lot of people are overcomplicating. So
I think the problem is also that nobody is measuring this. So we measure the fatigue level of pilots in the cockpit, and we have fatigue risk management system, but we are not applying fatigue risk management in the OCC. So we all consider them to be the superhuman, the heroes, and so on. Nobody is admitting that they feel depleted. You see it. They are not responding on something. They are busy. Busyness is nothing else than being overwhelmed and depleted. But that's a bit, again, it's a cultural problem. So interestingly, in the cockpit, they are against. They have a zero error policy, but on the ground, it is totally okay if people make errors based on a bad and fatigued brain state, but it is somehow accepted because people make mistakes.
Right. And going back to what you said at the beginning, I've always said to every client, what gets measured gets managed. Right. And so when you measure it, it's not you're not catching people in the wrong. People are very afraid to be caught in the wrong. That's not what this is about. And the faster any industry can normalize that, the less difficulty you will have with getting the best talent, because they know that the culture is set up to support them, not for them to defend, deny, and things like that. And if you're looking for an interesting read on culture, you don't even have to read the whole book, but Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers, the book Outliers, there's a chapter on a specific airline and what they did to mitigate safety issues they were having. And it's a fascinating chapter that very simply talks about the importance of creating that culture, very, very, very standard. I know that sounds clinical, and I don't mean it to, but we know so much more now than we have ever known, and we're only going to get smarter as a species if we choose to evolve in the correct way and use tools in a way that pushes our critical thinking and our judgment and our ability to discern, and not just offload everything, because that I firmly believe would be a cultural disaster. And these are the things that need to be managed or measured so they can be managed, so that systems can be designed around human ability and not human deficiency. Right. In fact, I forget where I heard or read this recently about, it might have been in one of your writings, Daniel, about how is it Dole's down in DC? Dole's I'm not, what's the airport in Washington, DC? I'm blanking on the name, but
it's Dulles. Is it not Dulles Airport?
Dole's, did I say it? Okay, that's right. Okay. And it was so interesting because this woman said we get on new controllers, and within a short amount of time, like 50% leave, because the conditions are so stressful that most are not able to do it. And that is an operation that is taking somebody from intentional state to depleted state very, very quickly. And in the process of that being the reality and not solving for that reality, they're not only struggling with talent management issues, they're struggling with depleting the remaining talent that's there. And so this is a very real solution that can be worked in to every organization. So now I'd like to ask you, now that you have new language around brain state, which brain state is your operation designed for? And which state are your controllers actually in by hour 8? And you can type both answers in the chat. One word for each is fine. I'm genuinely curious if anybody is in an intentional state after 8 hours. I mean, Daniel, I think you can speak. There's research to that. I think that's actually pretty impossible, but maybe automatic is possible. Let's see.
Well, I would say the entire industry is reactionary. 10 years ago, management by exception came on the agenda. This was already a big breakthrough. Oh, now we are looking in the future. But if you go in an OCC, everything is reactionary. Because the people, and I think Yuri put it into into the shed, coordinating everything, and that's nothing else than being reactive. Because if everything is already prepared, what do I need to coordinate? And that's coming from how the processes are designed, how the IT systems are selected, and then the ops controllers are hired to cope with the status quo. And yeah, pilots are unionized, they go on strike if the working conditions are not as desired, and OCC controllers, they accept the status quo.
Yeah, and Martin, I wanted to share, Martin said, if 60% from all persons are following this process, then I will be happy. There will never be 100%. And I think that's fair to say of every organization, right? No matter the industry is what I mean. Adoption at scale is not an easy thing. And also it's never just black and white, like it's all this all the time. You know, it fluctuates in and out depending upon various conditions. He also shared, I think that the customer focus must be for everybody very central. And that's a great point. I agree. I think the brand soul of any airline needs to be who they are serving and how they are serving them and how they're keeping them safe. That is,
I think.
Go ahead, Martin. Yeah.
Sorry, I think the very important thing. So I'm an advisor, but I worked for 40 years in the OCC by Swissair.
Yeah.
And so the focus is in the OCC, so we have to be very flexible. We are living with changes and short decisions, but the focus is always top on the priority safety and customer needs, you know.
Yes.
And we have to look after the costs, you know. But the most important thing is the safety, and I think with people, so if we have not just operational problems, but long problems in a long area, so we need to have a certain pain that everybody see that in fact that his job will be considered, and so they have to accept that we have go through the process with a clear goal, you know. So a clear goal must be here.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Well said, Martin. Thank you so much. And Yuri, thank you for typing reactive, Daniel, reactive. And we can see, you know, based on the original slide, that this is not the state that we want anyone in when making critical, timely, safety-related decisions. And especially when these OCCs are understaffed. And then I haven't put in the layer of what that individual is going through outside of work. To think that stops at the door is unrealistic. You know, humans are dealing with a million other things that are on their minds. Most are very good about being professional and keeping it separate, but it still can impact brain state. And so
I think sorry.
No,
I think just nowadays, so actual, it's very difficult because everybody's under stress. So we have to cancel flights due to geopolitical circumstances, and so in these days, so we are all a little bit overstressed, you know, because each day is changing. We don't know what about tomorrow and after tomorrow, and so we have always to make decisions in the OCC, and that depends the flexibility of the cabin crew and the cockpit crew, you know.
Yeah.
And the cockpit crew. So we have the problem in Switzerland that we don't have enough cockpit crew members.
Okay.
But we have too much cabin crew members, you know.
Okay. Yep. Yeah.
And so the pilots are always under stress, and we have to consider the law, you know, the compliance, and it's not easy.
It is not easy. I can't imagine. I have not done it personally, but I know I've learned quite a bit from Daniel in a very short amount of time. I also have a stepmother that worked for an airline for most of my childhood and teen years. So I've certainly been around it and heard a great deal of stories, and it's not easy. It's not easy. But I think that leadership that is always taking the time to assess and think through some of the things that we've discussed here today that I'm sure that you covered last week in the aviation conferences. That's how we can remain as committed to the clients, customers, and to our people that serve, your crewing and your staffing and your pilots and everybody that delivers on that brand promise for your customers. I think that being able to have these hard questions and think through these things is what matters most in ensuring everybody is doing the very, very best that they can be doing. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, your talk was not part of the conference last week, and this is part of the problem because people present all their algorithms, models, and so on, and nobody is taking care of the human factor. Nobody's asking the question, how is the user applying all this? And that's also why the industry is not advancing, because we all have the solutions out there. And no HR department of an airline is understanding that the people hired under the best intentions have not an optimal work environment. And because nobody is measuring this, and because nobody is admitting, I feel depleted, because nobody wants to appear weak, this situation is somehow supported from the, I would call, ignorance, because hopefully now we can educate people about their brain state, because if you don't know, you are not complaining, you just feel, it's me, it's my personal issue. Because I'm always asking, when I'm meeting airlines, what makes you a good day, and when are you going with a nice sentiment home? And I'm very rarely getting an answer on that one, because we take care of crew member well-being and crew member satisfaction. And I'm very much interested in ops controller and crew controller satisfaction. But this is not a buzzword in the industry. And that's, I think, we have to educate people. This is a big topic. I get direct messages from people who admit they have high blood pressure. They have colleagues who passed away because they were close to burnout and so on. And nobody's talking about this topic in the industry. And it's a big, big topic.
That's very odd to me. And here's why. Because this is costing the companies an exorbitant amount of money in healthcare costs.
Yes, but on the other hand, let's say you have a lot of people who want to work for an airline, because while working for an airline, you have travel benefits. And that's where you're accepting some other things. Then there are very strict communication guidelines and rules. Nobody is speaking about it. I get a lot of direct messages and don't mention me and blah, blah, blah. So that's why on my posts, I'm not getting many comments from people from the airline. Nobody is allowed to admit, yeah, that's exactly the problem, he's right, and so on, because it's a big omerta in this industry. Because if you actively confirm, yeah, I'm actively accepting that my people have brain issues, you are in trouble. Yeah. And that's why I'm somehow poking the bear, because it's an issue. So
it is an issue, and you're right. You're right in the way that you framed it. I just still go back to, I think that the organizations that are taking this seriously and augmenting the way work is done and thinking of it, not that you're, I guess it does seem like you're admitting you're doing something wrong, but it's not. It's a factor of evolution and the way things have designed, and the way that another book I think I told you about is the book Anti-Fragile. It's proven time and again that this is actually the thinking, the way of thinking that you just described is actually very, very cost prohibitive, short and long term. And if we're talking about it being, a business that might care about their customer and care about the people. But at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's a business and it has to operate efficiently, and they want good profit margin. They want to stay in the, in the green, not the red. All of these factors, there's time and time again shown that when you address the issues that you just spoke to, you actually open up the possibility to greater profitability. And the messy middle of the admitting where it's broken or wrong is what people can't get past. And then they stay where they are now. And maybe they make fine tweaks over time, but it's never to the efficiency gains, the safety gains, and the profitability, the revenue gains that are there for them to achieve, should they choose to.
And there's one proof point. There's one proof point. Unless an airline OCC is not agreeing on voice recording, black boxing, and really measuring, they want to hide it. Because up in the air, all pilots agree on voice recorder and black box because it's a safety means. It's a learning tool. If there is a crash, we can learn out of the situation and we can improve. On the ground, people come with privacy and union and blah, blah, blah. I'm saying, hey, guys, the pilots have a union too, and they have agreed on it. Why are you on the ground? You don't want to record? Because they want to hide it. That's the proof point. If an airline says, no, we start recording, okay, finally, they have understood.
Human behavior, human behavior, if it's one thing, it's predictable in some ways, right? I mean, we can predict that we as humans are always going to protect our safety if we feel that our job is threatened, and humans are going to do what they're wired to do. But like I said, the more we can normalize these conversations, the more we can think differently and not just assume the industry standard and assume maybe some biases that we might have about the way work is done, the way things operate, and the fact that there might be cracks in the cultural foundation that makes us less effective, less competitive, and less able to handle disruption in a timely and safe manner. Again, a very complex situation that we're talking about in simplified terms as a first step, as a starting point. Because I don't think, I really firmly believe it's not sustainable long-term. And as technology evolves and you're looking to implement that, it's going to be the humans that make it work. And it's going to be the human lived experience and the intuition and judgment and discernment that's going to be critical as industries, and specifically aviation industry, evolves. Definitely. So here's what we know, thanks to Daniel's phenomenal research and years of visiting OCCs. We know that 60 to 70% of controllers' cognitive capacity is consumed by system navigation. This actually means, based on the conditions of that this is the depleted state before disruption begins. So people are already in and out of a less effective state for a large portion of their shifts. You also have 14 fragmented systems a controller navigates during a single shift. This is what I call decision drag. This is the inability to make critical decisions in a timely manner because they're spending their mental bandwidth on that system navigation and not on what their brains are most needed for. This is the automatic state. They're doing the work of the intentional state, but they're actually in an automatic state. And then you have hour 8 of a 12-hour shift, maybe more. I'm not clear on, I'm not one to speak on the exact timeframes, but when screen navigation costs more than the decisions it serves. Okay, so now you're in a reactive state and you're running the operation. Okay, and so this means increased risk of error during a period of disruption. This is even more scary to think about. This is even more likely for something for close calls or for something far worse. And so taking the brain state of the control centers and everybody responsible for the customer and the safety of passengers and pilots and crew, this is something that needs to be designed differently. This is something that needs, you know, an overhaul, for lack of a better word, in terms of the cultural foundation and how the strategy layer, the technology layer, and the human layer all work together to ensure safety and profitability. You can have both. So the business reality is that strong strategy and modern tech will fall short of, if the decision architecture, that's just the phrase that I tend to use, but the workflows, the hierarchies, this is where the more complex part of the reality comes in, right? If they're wearing down the people that are responsible for execution every day, you are absorbing enormous costs related to the efficiency aspect, to the safety aspect, and then, like I mentioned before, the either high turnover costs, high onboarding costs, high healthcare costs, high, I'm forgetting one, onboarding, turnover, execution, absenteeism. So these are all real and extremely high costs. In my research, throughout the year, I always do different market research relating to cost, awareness, and the amount of money that organizations spend on healthcare costs alone is exorbitant. And these are the things that when a controller cannot stay in an intentional state as often as possible, they can't perform the way your architectural design or your decision architecture, excuse me, and the strategy with the technology and the way it all goes together. Those are the cracks in your foundation that it appears, based on what Daniel has shared, people are afraid to admit, and they're afraid to acknowledge it and start. I always say, the way I have always said it is entirely possible to put a Band-Aid on a gushing wound while also evaluating, a root cause, like a surgeon or a plastic surgeon that can repair and return you to the state of, that you want to be in. And so I think it's going to take brave leadership to embrace some of the concepts that Daniel speaks to, that I speak to, that Martin and Yuri have been nice enough to collaborate or to offer in this discussion. I think we as humans, we want to come with a solution, but the best way to get to a solution is by putting more brains on the problem and working through that all together, and each in their own zone of genius, and each coming together for the greater good, keeping that simplicity front and center, because that is how you solve the problem, not by adding more layers of complexity, because that, we know based on today, is just going to push everybody, not just OCCs, into the wrong brain state, and that is not conducive to solving the world's biggest problems. And so I'd like you to take a minute and just think about this. You're living it. You're living it every day. You've been living it for years. What does your OCC look like when your controllers are in reactive or depleted states? What does their communication look like? What are their decisions like? The quality of their decisions? How many workarounds are they doing to ensure they get their job done, that they protect passengers and safety? What does it look like in reality? What breaks down first? Who stops making decisions? And what gets invented on the spot and becomes the system that is not on a piece of paper anywhere in strategy, in organizational design, workflows, that would not be able to be repeated by anybody other than the person who knows the workaround? These are real. This is the business reality that's impacting your ability to not only handle disruption, but to remain highly competitive? And these are the questions, if anybody would like to answer them. If not, just think through it. These are a window. These questions here that I've covered are a window into the brain state throughout a shift, over a week, over a month, over years. And it compounds. The effects compound. So they don't get better, right? In many situations. If the conditions, if the culture conditions do not make the change or support that change for them. And that is where your competitive advantage lies, is creating, it's not being afraid to say, this isn't working and we have to find a new way forward. And it may require a short-term solution while we build the long-term solution. That's entirely possible. Companies do that all the time. Daniel shared that communication gets a bit more heated. Yeah, absolutely. I can't even imagine actually. Communication is, when people are reactive, it's like I said at the beginning of this presentation, you can't use your prefrontal cortex if you are in a reactive or depleted state. You have no control over that. Your biology takes over, you have no control. So, and everybody has different emotional regulation. Everybody has different EQ, emotional intelligence. Their ability to handle things, it differs from person to person. There are some people that fly off the handle the minute they feel like they're losing control. They're fluctuating in and out of brain state much faster than somebody else who's maybe able to remain more emotionally neutral in any given situation. And now you have that tension, that friction within your OCC. And that's contributing to a degraded brain state for the other person, even if they're not the one that's getting heated. Decisions are rushed, then really thought through. Yeah, because they can't. They're not, you cannot think through, you can't think clearly if your amygdala is agitated. You're thinking emotionally, not logically. And then urgency beats necessity. That's when the autopilot kicks in. That's when the adrenaline shoots up and forces critical thinking from the prefrontal cortex, and they're able to respond. And so that's how we go in and out in all these situations. And luckily, most of the time, controllers do their job and they do it well. But I don't know if it's because I met Daniel or I'm just more in tune. I feel like every day I open up my phone and the news reports tell me of another near miss or another this or that. And I don't know if it's now I'm just more aware, or are these trends, concerning trends, escalating? And I think with the collective intelligence of the industry, this problem, like we've discussed, is entirely within the realm of solving if we can choose to acknowledge where things need to be repaired and understand that there's a way to do some short-term, kind of what I call a Band-Aid on the wound, and then actually address the root cause of the situation and heal the wound. And so, again, we've covered a lot. This is obviously a very complex topic, but I believe that something as simple as understanding brain state and the way that things are designed for, both strategy, technology, and business reality, you have a choice about dealing with disruption and with positioning yourself more competitively. Because I think that the leaders who are comfortable with discomfort, I'm going to say that again, the leaders who are comfortable with discomfort are seeing the reality and they're positioning themselves more competitively within the industry. So let's go over the operations that are building a new way forward. They are building decision structure judgment guardrails is what I call them, and trust into their operation systems before pressure arrives. And I want to just note, trust often has a very soft connotation. And I don't mean that negatively. People believe that it has to be built through time and rapport and soft skills. That's not the kind of trust I'm talking about. The kind of trust I'm talking about is building predictability as often as possible into the culture and foundation and the organizational design so that trust is grown and compounded because everybody knows the expectations, everybody knows the guardrails, everybody knows what not just what's expected of them, but the conditions that allow for them to do their best work and the conditions that allow them to handle disruption timely, assertively, and with confidence. And that is what builds the trust that I'm talking about. Not the individual like leader to OCC, to controller or peer to peer. That's not the trust I'm talking about in this situation. So what does that look like? Pre-agreed decision ownership. It's stated, it's factual, it is say it, own it, deliver it. I use that often in my work. Say it, own it, deliver it. If you can't, speak up immediately. That's where the trust comes in. That's where the cultural cracks are going to be exposed, is when somebody doesn't feel they can do that safely and without retaliation or without, something happening with, to them in their role, then they won't. And they're hiding things from you. And that is one of the worst cultures that you can build, is to not have that structure. When you have disruption, when you have pre-agreed decision ownership, there's no time to negotiate because it's already clear that these are the conditions that we have, kind of accounted for, so that when there's pressure, decisions default to whoever steps in, which I think Daniel said urgency, and fatigue or volume rather than clarity is what happens if it's not pre-agreed. You want defined thresholds for escalation. So when you are within conditions, and this even has to account for edge cases. Okay, you have to we can't predict the future, but we can have the past help us frame different aspects of reality. And so defining when X happens, Y is the owner. When the situation exceeds the process, the controller knows exactly where to go and feels confident doing that. These are the decision structures, the guardrails, and the trust that has to be baked in order to maintain that brain state as often as possible. Then you have to have shared language for risk and priority. Going back to the book I mentioned, that the chapter on, a specific airline, they were missing shared language. There was an actual cultural, and I don't mean the culture of the company, I mean the cultures of the individual and what is normal in their culture in terms of shared language. And when they removed that barrier or that cultural, I don't know that bias is the right way, it was out of respect, but it was something that was actually causing a safety hazard within the organization. So shared language eliminates it and keeps them in intentional state longer because they're using less brain calories to assess, judge, and decide within any given situation. And then lastly, you have psychological safety to override. And that means people feel safe to make these decisions or know when to escalate and that there's not going to be retribution for that escalation. And so these are the things that competitive airlines are doing now. And they're actually they're literally figuring out how to bring strategy, modern technology, and human in the loop, human conditions into they're bringing it into their cultural foundation and evolving. And so I'm not going to go over this slide. I want to be respectful of time. I will leave this. I will share this with Daniel so that if he wants to put this up, it's covered a lot of what I've gone over today in terms of the disconnect from leadership to the front line. And this is not, this is not just aviation. This is happening in almost every industry right now. Leaders are in the wrong brain state. Their cognitive load is way too high, navigating a million different realities right now. And the fact is, they're retracting. They're getting further from the front line. They're not clear on what business reality is. And so what they're seeing, what they're planning for, what they're assuming is not what the controllers are experiencing. And so we've got all levels within an organization going in and out of brain states that are not conducive to competitive advantage, safety, and innovation going forward. And so these are side by sides of the differences between the levels within an organization. And the gap between these two columns is where your safety margin and your competitive advantage, that's where it lives. That's where it lies. And so that's what more people need to be speaking to and solving for. And so the last question I have is, what would change first in your operation if your controllers could stay in intentional state through a full disruption? And I don't want you to answer what you think should change. Answer what you know would change. What would change first in your operation if your controllers could stay in intentional state through a full disruption? You're welcome to share. Please share your answers with Daniel. I'm sure it would help evolve his work even further and ensure the best support. I believe Daniel says, take back control. What do you mean? Can you elaborate on that, Daniel?
First, of course, it was the claim from the Brexit, but I think it's really meeting the reality. If you're really doing everything intentionally, you are also looking intentionally in the future. You are intentionally simulating answers on potential disruption. You are intentionally preparing all the scenarios. So then in the case of the disruption, you intentionally decide which of the prepared scenarios you put in place, because everything is already prepared. And then you really take back control. So you're not driven by urgency. You're not driven by external factors. You have everything under your own control because you decide which chess figure to put where, because you have thought several steps in advance.
Yeah. And what you just described is creating cohesion. And when you have cohesion, you can have clarity. And when you have clarity, you're operating from the right brain state. And I think people have come away from that because they were letting too much noise determine their decision making. And now it's time to start looking for the signal in all that noise, and take back control is a great way to say it. It's really understanding the brand promise, how you deliver on that brand promise, and how you create the conditions for your people to deliver on, your employees to deliver on that promise. And that's a simplified way of saying what you just said. And I think leadership has come away from that for far too long. And it's the answer to getting back, taking back control. And so to just wrap up too, at the beginning of this talk, I asked all of you to move your watch to the other wrist, to move your phone. The reason I did that is because I wanted you to feel discomfort, right? What are you likely going to do when this call is over? If you're like the thousands of people that I've trained, over the years, believe it or not, in big rooms, this is a small intimate group today, but in big rooms, almost everybody switches it back by the end of the talk. And it's a great reminder. And especially if you move your phone away during this chat, chances are you probably grabbed for it and brought it back and maybe checked on it. And if you didn't, that is amazing, because most humans, they revert back to what they know, without even thinking about it. They don't even think about it. They take it. And I often, especially like in bigger rooms, like think hundreds of people, when I ask people to look at it, so many have already switched it back without even thinking. And that is the issue that we're seeing here today, or that we're talking about today. Humans are going to, if they have discomfort, they're going to seek a way out of that discomfort as quickly as possible. And that's your workarounds. Those are the hidden inefficiencies that you don't even realize are happening, that's hurting your competitive advantage, that's making it harder to handle periods of disruption in the correct brain state, that makes it harder for the layers of an organization to work together in the same direction. So these are just some key things that I hope allow you to think about complexity more simply, so that we can collectively move forward on the next stage of, you know, the evolution within our industry, within our respective industries. If I want to say thank you to Daniel for having me. I always love, I'm very passionate about this topic, which he knows. And I've thoroughly enjoyed thinking about this topic in aviation. I've never had to do that before. And so it was a real brain, challenge for me, and I loved it. And I appreciate everybody. I appreciate controllers. I appreciate aviation. Everybody that helps my family and I stay safe every time that we fly, and give us, a wonderful experience. So thank you. If you would like to stay in touch with me, I'm active on LinkedIn. You can email me if you have any follow-up questions. My email is there. And I just thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much for this very interesting session.
Thank you, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much.
much.
Very
Ryan.
Thank you,
interesting.
Kim.
Appreciate you.
Bye.
So,
Thank you
yeah,
very much.
Yuri, what is your first reaction? How is it resonating with you as ops
It's
controller, knowing now what your brain is damaged every day?
yeah, no, we make decision every day. So my nature is crew controller, so we have a lot of disruption. But no, team approach is very interesting, and I will try to implement in our operation. So
Thank you so much.
thank you.
Yeah, I think, Kim, that was a fantastic presentation. And as I said earlier, I think such insightful new views on the state of the industry are very important for the industry to progress and to evolve. And the good thing is I will put this in YouTube. I will make a small write-up and will publish this tomorrow. And then hopefully more colleagues will watch it and will take their learnings out of it, because every marathon starts with the first step. We made the first step today. We do the next steps tomorrow and the week after. And so I will, from now on, always ask in which state the OCC believes to be, and I will use your 4 states. I think this is very helpful. And then let's see how many airlines are agreeing to change the state of their brain actively. And then I think we have achieved something fantastic for the entire industry. And interestingly, we will continue this conversation. So we will probably have a presentation on May with another AI expert, and we will talk specifically also about the US market. But in June, we have Lea Sophie Trampitsch-Wink from Auspo Control, and she made fantastic studies also on the human factor. I learned from her that the individual difference in highly trained and highly regulated processes per individual is only 4%. So 96% of the performance is made from the system around and from the process. So it's also very insightful. I think this gives also another angle on this entire discussion. How important is it to really look into the system, into the environment, and not follow this myth in our industry, oh, we need to train the people, because the area of improvement is in this 4% area, and I think the money is in this 96% area, and I think many people are not aware of. And she will talk about it, and this will be another insightful Airline Crewing Enigma session, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Thank you again, Kim, for your insights, and I think this will not be the last conversations we have together. And then
Thank
let's
you.
see what the future brings us.
Sounds
Thank you very
wonderful.
much.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very
Thank
much.
you.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye.